Hi everybody, today's video is about a vintage Ovation guitar and life giving you a second chance. It's a good story. Hang around. Hi everybody. Thanks for coming to the channel today. I have a story to share with you about this guitar, but just kind of philosophical life in general. I'm an old guy, so I get to pontificate. That kind of comes with the territory. The year is 1968. Okay, think of what you know about 1968. Vietnam War, Tet Offensive, Martin Luther King gets assassinated, Robert F. Kennedy gets assassinated. It was an election year. It was the United States kind of going crazy. I was a little kid at the time, about 8, going on 9 years old. I would have turned 9 that September. It was America was kind of a troubled place. My father, he was away from home for a year, deployed to Vietnam, and so that was always a concern for us. We hoped for his safety, prayed for his safety every day, and he did fortunately come home to us again in one piece. That was a great blessing, but it was a kind of a year of a lot of changes and stuff. Back then, as many of you might know, there was only like 3 major TV networks back then. You had CBS, ABC, and NBC. And so we had, like on your channels, on your TV, you only had 3 stations, 3, 10, or 13 in the area where I lived. And so we would watch TV for something to do. My mom and I would be there at home alone, and just to kind of pass the time. You always were looking for something good to kind of just distract you from the concerns of the day and everything. What would happen is that the regularly scheduled television programs of the time would be where they would kind of go on hiatus for the summer months. They would be during the school months. They would be on producing new episodes, and then you would have the summer months come in, and either you get reruns of those programs, which of course made viewership go down, and more people were outside doing things. Air conditioning wasn't common back then, so people would go out and do stuff rather than sit there in the stifling house in the heat in the evening. And so it was they would bring these summer replacement series that they would show you during the summer months, and sometimes they would try out new TV programs, and if they were successful, then they might get a shot at having their own. Well, one of those was the Glen Campbell Good Time Hour. I was always a big fan of Glen Campbell. There's my autographed picture of Glen Campbell, so I can do that, get some glare off of it there. It's one of my prized possessions here. It's a gift that my wife got for me. So Glen Campbell, I remember distinctly, we'd sit down and watch his show. He had a number of hits on the radio about that time. He was a popular country artist, but moved over to the pop sector. He was a great singer and a brilliant guitarist, and he happened to play Ovation guitars. Right, the guitars kind of similar to these, with the round back, the distinctive sound hole, the odd-looking headstock. I didn't know anything about guitars at the time, just being a little kid, but I know we liked watching his program. And every week when his program would come on, my mom and I would watch it. It was kind of lift the burden of Dad being gone, and the little comedy skits they do. It was a kind of a variety show. But at the end of the show, there'd always be the little section where Glenn would sit down with his banjo player, and the famous banjo player, and his name escapes me right now. I want to say it was John McEwen, but I'm not sure if that was him or not. Then they would play a variety of different songs, and just people really loved that. And a lot of times it was just them with guitar and banjo, and then singing and playing. Sometimes they'd have a guest with them, like Roy Clark or some other singer, Bobby Gentry, or some others. And it was just a good, wholesome show to watch, entertaining. And Glen Campbell was one of my guitar heroes early on when I first started learning how to play the guitar. And of course, it was an iconic thing in my mind to see him sitting up there with this distinctive style of guitar. These Ovation guitars were new at the time. They were kind of a revolutionary thing. So I started bugging my parents to play guitar at about the age of 10. They finally relented and got me my first guitar when I was about, just a few months after that. But it was a guitar with the strings this high up off the neck, and it was hard to play, and eventually ended up in the attic collecting dust until a friend of the family, they had a cousin, an adult cousin that came to stay with them sometimes. He was in the Navy. When he was in town, not on the ship, he would go stay with them. And of course, my friend and I, we looked up to him. He was just everything to us, everything you ever wanted to be. He had a beard. He's in the Navy. Had a yellow Volkswagen Bug, and he went out and bought a guitar to learn how to play guitar. And he bought a decent Gibson guitar, a nice Gibson guitar. Back then, they only cost about $400 or $500. We thought, he's crazy, spending $400 on a guitar. Doesn't even know how to play. Well, then about 6 weeks later, he's playing some simple songs and little 3-chord, 4-chord things like that. And we were amazed that he could play these songs. So I said, well, hey, if he can do that in 6 weeks, I can do that in 6 weeks. So I went up in the attic and got that dusty old guitar off, and got that down from the attic and dusted it off, and started working how to play it. And then I have been playing guitar ever since. So I started really working on playing guitar the summer I turned 14. Now, let's put these together. Glenn Campbell, iconic thing in my mind. This is the kind of guitar that I wanted to play. A few years later, my family, we moved to Alaska, and there was a little music store up there, and I ended up playing in a school band. Ended up buying my first nice electric guitar from them, which was also an Ovation. Ovation made solid body electric guitars at the time, a model called the Breadwinner, and it was white, the one I had. And I bought an amp and everything, had saved up for it, and paid this thing off because they gave me a little bit of credit to be able to buy it. And I was on my way to being a professional guitarist, and just loved that instrument. Later on, was like the summer before my senior year, I started working full time in that music store where I had bought that, and a guitar like this came in. My Breadwinner was white, and this guitar with this white finish was like, hey, this is the perfect thing to go with the Breadwinner. So I bought a guitar just like this one, the same model. This is an Ovation Balladeer. The top on this thing is not painted white. What they did is a very unusual finish. They had some chemical process they used that basically bleached the wood. Because if you look really closely on this, and you probably can't see it, but basically you can see the wood grain through here. It's transparent, and you can see the grain in the wood. It's not just white paint or white lacquer. It's a really very attractive, beautiful finish. And it was so striking, just the contrast. I was like, oh, that thing's really neat. And so I bought the guitar and the case for it, and this was paired with my white Ovation electric. And so they were kind of a pair that went together. Now, let's fast forward ahead a little bit. In 1983, I got married, joined the Air Force. My wife and I, we moved out to Colorado. We're trying to make ends meet, trying to pay electric bill and paying the light bill and keep food on the table and pay rent and everything. And just as a young E1 in the military, you didn't get paid very much. And as the Air Force's attitude was like, well, if you were supposed to have a wife, we would have issued you one. And so they weren't particularly supportive of young airmen who were married. And we got into financial straits, and just to eat, I ended up having to sell this guitar, the guitar like this one, and I took this to a pawn shop, and the guy offered me like $85 for it. I mean, it was an insult, but $85 would buy us groceries for a couple of weeks, just the two of us. And so that's what I did. I sold that guitar, and it pained me. It was really the first personal sacrifice I'd made kind of for my wife and family. I had made various sacrifices along the way of, in my life and stuff, of serving as a missionary for my church and some of the expenses involved with that. But nothing was like this, where you had to really, this was like cutting off an arm and handing it over. It was a hard thing to do. And I missed this guitar tremendously over the years. Well, let's jump ahead to 2023. In my expanding guitar collection, I have several 12 strings, and the 12 string you see behind me here, which I've done a couple of videos with it on the channel, That's an Ovation pacemaker from 1978. I wanted one dearly all through my high school years, but I really couldn't afford one. And it was a great thing to get that 12 string. I love playing it. It's not the best playing 12 string I've got. The best playing 12 string I've got is my Guild. And then these others here are also just fantastic sounding guitars, but there's something about the sound of the Ovation that's very unique. Fun to play, really good action, and I enjoy playing it tremendously. And there's an emotional connection to it because it takes me back to my youth. Now, on a couple of days ago, I'm hanging out over the Memorial Day weekend, and I'm looking on. I had got the idea since I get this Ovation, maybe I ought to get me an Ovation 6-string again. I have to go try and find one of those vintage ones. They're getting harder to find that they don't have cracks in them or that are in really good shape and stuff. They're instruments. These are almost 50 years old now. So anyway, I'm looking on Guitar Citter's website this last weekend, and lo and behold, this instrument was on there. This is the exact model I had. And I was like, oh my gosh, I got this thing. I started flipping out, and my wife is looking at me, rolling her eyes like, oh, here we go again. And so, but she knows the emotional connection I had to this one from so many years ago. So here it is. It's like 40 years later. I go strolling into, so here's what sealed the deal. I see it on the Guitar Center website, and I look at where the guitar was located, where they had to ship it from or something. It's in my Guitar Center down the street in my town. I'm going like, it's a sign from God. It's like this instrument is like, this was sent here for me. And so I zipped down there today and bought this instrument. This is a 1977 Balladeer, same year, the year after mine was built, I think. It's got the same finish. This thing is like a museum piece. A lot of times when you buy a used instrument from Guitar Center, they're not in the greatest shape. This one is like a museum piece. There's not a scratch on it. It's like it's been put in the case and left there for 40 years. I threw some new strings on this thing. Great fast neck on it. The neck on this thing was straight and true. Did not have to tweak the action. The fingerboard was kind of grimy actually when I first got it, and I kind of took a little bit of steel wool, polished up the frets a little bit, and took some oil and kind of oiled down the fingerboard. Ebony fingerboard, 5-piece neck that's mahogany maple alternating. The neck on this thing, there's not a nick. It's just perfect all the way through. Headstock that doesn't have any dings on it. The bridge, everything is like just beautiful on it. There's no cracks anywhere. I was just amazed at the condition this thing's in. I am so happy to have this guitar. I feel so blessed. It's just a wonderful, wonderful instrument. It sounds good, feels good. I'll probably put it in G tuning. I used to play my other one a lot in G tuning. It's in standard right now, but I might put it in open G tuning just to kind of relive my old glory days. But anyway, this is a super fun thing to have. Figured I would just share this story with you. I am emotionally bonded to this instrument already, and I've had it less than just a few hours. But it's getting something back that I lost. That was something that was very precious to me. It's not the same guitar, but it's darn close, as close as I'm going to get. And it's a 1977. This thing is what, 46 years old, 40, something like that. It's a marvelous thing. So thanks for watching, and thanks for listening to my story. Do you have a guitar story, one that you're fond of, one that you can't live without, one that you want to pass down to your wife or your grandchildren when you're dead and gone? I'd like to hear those stories. I am just as a lifelong guitarist, getting this thing back is just really a great blessing to me. So if you like this story, like, subscribe, and share, and I will come up with some stuff to play on this thing for you soon, and you can hear me play some tunes on it. All right, thanks again for watching. I'll let you guys go. Bye, everybody. Take care.